Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Miri Beskan, a distinguished figure in psychological research, especially in the realms of memory and metamemory. Dr. Beskan's groundbreaking work has significantly advanced our understanding of how we perceive and predict our memory processes, particularly through her exploration of the perceptual fluency hypothesis. In today's episode, we are eager to explore Dr. Beskan's journey in science, her impactful research, and how her findings bridge the gap between complex psychological theories and everyday understanding. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Miri Beskan. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
The invitation. I heard many good things about you from the students, and in terms of yours, how do you welcome students to your lab, and what is your attitude about this?
How do I welcome students? Okay, so typically, I do have a bunch of interests that relate to memory in general. So we actually, try to combine our different interests, come together, and in some way, try to come up with topics that we can research together. We try to come up with questions that really interest us. So that's the type of thing that we do. In general, in terms of class environment, I try to make sure that the topics in some way relate to real life applications, right? Obviously the theory is very important, understanding the normal implications is important, but real life, how it actually occurs in your life is the thing that makes the difference in terms of whether people will carry it forward to their own life or not.
Yeah. And in the lectures, what are the things you do that are different, that maybe make students like you more?
I don't know if it's very different. I mean, it's been a while since I haven't seen one of our professors teach. I think one of the things is I do give a lot of real life examples, and they usually relate to relationships, right? Back and forth. So when you do that, people are suddenly, what's going on? Because technically, if you are looking at it, I have been teaching this learning, thinking, remembering class for many years now. And it's basically, classical conditioning, operant conditioning. Right. People say, oh, the Pavlov's dog, how does it really refer to our lives? But it does more than you think it does. So once you put it into context for the students in terms of hey, look, you are doing the same thing. You are getting conditioned. Half of our lives, 90% of our lives are on autopilot.
Yeah. Especially in social media and stuff nowadays, definitely conditioning your cursor.
Oh my god, you find yourself swiping through reels for half an hour before you can get out of bed, right? What happens? Because that very little 15-second reel is actually giving you this boost of happiness for about a second, and social media is really savvy enough to get you captured. They look at which ones you stay at longer, and they keep on giving you that type of content. So you are stuck there looking at this
stuck in your own loop, kind of.
Yeah, you are, and it's. Once you kind of start doing all of these, giving these examples, talking about how, this is the case with the relationships, like why they are here or why they are in class, like at that moment that they are like, I keep on like asking students, why are you here right now? And it's like there's all this like existential crisis. I don't know. So I think that keeps students like a little bit more like yeah. It's like whoa, they keep on wondering, what is this woman going to tell us now?
Since you mentioned this this awareness of the conditioning in social media, I mean, even when I'm scrolling, I'm kind of realizing what I'm doing, but I keep scrolling.
Right.
So there is this kind of meta-awareness of what's going on, but you can't change it. Is that occurring in every aspect of the, I don't know, judgments?
That's a good question.
Like biases, even if you know.
Yeah. I mean, so technically, like one of the theoretical ways that we classify human behavior is like automatic versus controlled processes.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about like controlled processes, these are the things that you put your energy in. These are the things that you have to like spare your cognitive resources in.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the automatic resources, the automatic processes are those that are like more like a reflex, like conditioning in general. So like most of the time in our lives, like both of these like events are both online at the same time. Most of the time they do agree, but there are also instances in which they do not agree, right? Like, so your automatic let's think about phobias, for example. Like if you have, say, a phobia of cats, right? Like you might know like cats are not that terribly like dangerous on a very conscious level, but like you cannot keep yourself from getting shaking, you know, like having all of these like fears, coming up with irrational stuff. Like on a rational basis, of course you do know, but on a like very primitive basis, you must have had some experience, like you might have like associated something, so like they are deep in your core and it's difficult to get rid of, even if you know on a conscious level that this is the case, right?
Yeah, rationality is not the solver, or is not really influencing some parts of the brain, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like, we do, like, function on both of the levels, right?
Yeah.
So, like, so think about being attracted to somebody, right? So, like, I mean, part of it is the fact that, like, you are attracted to this person. Maybe they are familiar to someone that you know from your past. Like, they might be familiar in terms of all the other relationships that you had. It might be the parents that they are alike, or, you know, like, there was something that is familiar. It doesn't have to be good, though. Like, it just needs to be familiar. So you get attracted to this person. There might also be, you know, like they also claim that maybe sometimes it's the genes, like pheromones, you are getting attracted to all of this, like smells, like gene, like differences in between, like make you more attracted to each other because, like, you want to have, like, how there's all these like theories, like, but it's
both seems to be about subconscious or
uncontrolled processes. So, like, this is one part, though. But, like, when you are talking about like relationship, it's partly that attraction, but there's also the lifelong compatibility, or like compatibility on a regular basis. Like, can you communicate with this person? Do you understand this person? Do you have different similar types of lives, similar types of friends? Can you be interested in things? Like, could you possibly have any chance of making it with this person, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, like, sometimes, you know, your heart is a little bit further away from your rational mind, which thinks of the compatibility. You fall in love with somebody and you're like, I don't like them, but I love them. How is that possible? So part of it is possibly this familiarity sincerity that you feel like at your very core. And then like, I mean, you know, like what happens is like, so like let's say that like you decide, oh, I cannot be with this person, this is not good for me, and then like at some point you go and drink a couple of beers, your inhibition is gone, your primitive self is out there to drunk text this person in the middle of the night, right? So that's part of it too. So I mean like these two levels do not always like agree with each other. When they do, it's lovely, but like one of, for example, your like more like problem-solving skills, like complex mind that acts on rationality, might even rationalize the like primitive like part of you, like can work to do that, you know. So it's a difficult like process to take into consideration.
And another problem with this thing is, it seems like the process is actually reverse. We feel like we can control with our rationality, but actually what controls rationality is the part that we are unaware of, because usually in cases I see people do stuff, then they rationalize.
Yeah.
Then they come up with the rational explanation that why they do this or feel like this, or
they actually both work both ways. So right, it's like, I mean, part of it is like you do this like stupid thing and then rationalize it because it's familiar, because it's like feels right, like that's what you think is like what your gut is telling you, which is like your conditioning basically. But like sometimes also like very simple things you cannot really decide on, because you know, like it's just like your cognitive part is like overthinking all of these issues sometimes too. So like, I mean, it goes both ways. Like you sometimes overthink a very simple problem just because you like have been doing this specific problem in a certain way, when a simple problem that can be solved in a very simple manner, you don't do that because like you have been overworking your cognitive side too much, or like more effortful side so much.
Yeah, exactly. And since we are at the topic of conditioning, I gotta ask, there are a lot of, I don't know, schools of thought in psychology, like behavioral, cognitive, this, that. Like, how do you distinguish those, and do you see some sort of the best, or I don't know? What do you think about this? Really, the branches of psychology. It feels like it shouldn't be this many, but it is, and there are cases where they work, which I understand, but
I mean, technically, you know, so there's like a historical process through which all of this happens. So like if you are looking at, like, psychology is still pretty young in terms of like when it was born, when the first lab was established. End of 1800s, I think, like 19th century. So like from then on, you know, like they tried looking into the person, and then like they were like, oh no, like we cannot look into the person, they are too subjective, they are too different, let's just look at behavior. And then like no, like if we are looking at behavior but not looking at the mind processes, that's a problem. And then like comes like all of this like brain imaging technology. Oh, now we can look into the brain, but does it really like correlate with the mind? So there's all of these questions that are going about. I mean, I actually, you know, like have been trained in cognitive psychology, like classical cognitive psychology, which looks at behavior, and then you try to make inferences about the causes of that behavior, how the system works. Like my cognitive neuroscientist like colleagues are looking at it at a like brain level analysis, like they are looking at biological parts, how it correlates with that. I think part of it depends on like what question you are asking. So like for me, how the system works and like why it works the way it does is more important. So like I'm still looking at this behavior and trying to understand it at a like theoretical level in general, which is the cognitive like tradition in general. There are many different theories, obviously. I don't know. I mean, like, again, like, it depends on what question you are asking. So, for example, you know, like, if you are trying to understand, like, a person at a basic process level, maybe, you know, like, looking at cognition is better. But at a real-life level, the person is coming, like, if you are a therapist, just looking at this, like, very specific, this is the stimulus, this is the response, this is what's happening in between, may not necessarily be enough. Like, so sometimes maybe looking at the past, like, what were your previous conditionings, what were your previous learnings, what triggers your behavior, looking at it, like, I mean, you still need to understand all of this, like, stimulus and response, like, contingency in general, but you also have to understand this unique person at a unique level, like what was the experience of this person, and like what is it that this person wants to change, what is it that like triggers this person, what makes them tick, right? So I mean, obviously, like for my own experiments, I do very behavioral, very cognitive stuff, but at a, you know, like therapy level, I think like bringing in all of these like trains of thought that actually, you know, like try to make a person understand a person from a humane perspective is important.
And with all the dimensions, I guess.
Yeah. Also, you know, like, I mean, obviously, like, I mean, I also believe in science, obviously. So like, evidence-based stuff becomes important, right? Like, I mean, you kind of want to have, okay, this is something that works, or like, this is something that doesn't seem to be very, you know, effective in this. So, for example, if you are looking at phobias, systematic desensitization and exposure therapy seem to work really well. But, you know, like, if you are looking at, like, you know, problems with, like, in a relationship, like, looking at, like, cognitive behavioral therapy in terms of, like, this exposure therapy is not going to do anything. If you are looking at depression, that's not, like, there might be different approaches that also work with different problems that people have too, so.
Okay. So, kind of a politically correct answer that you gave, so I'm going to ask do you anticipate them coming together at some point? All of the schools of thought, all of the branches? Like, we search for a theory of everything in physics, but could there be in psychology as well?
I just listened to a talk about this like a couple of days ago. It seems unlikely to me, honestly.
Why not?
We were too far away from that place. I mean, the only thing that I can think of that seems to make sense in most like stuff, like in most like cognitive processes, seems to be this effortful versus automatic like part of things, like with perception, with cognition, like memory, with problem solving, with decision making. Some of the stuff is automatic, some of the stuff is effortful. So Daniel Kahneman actually like defines it as system 1, system 2. Like some other theorists look at it as effortful, automatic, some other theorists. But I mean, other than that, like it feels difficult. So like even within memory, like which is my area of expertise, you do not find this like one theory that seems to explain only like long-term memory processes. Like even like long-term memory, like it's not even the full memory. And there are all these like at the beginning of like 2000s, 2005, 2010, like somewhere around there, Rodiger, who is a very like well-known researcher in memory, he was saying why there will be no laws of memory, right? And it was like, yeah, like whatever you find with one situation seems to fail with the other type of memory that you have. So you might be having like multiple systems or multiple way of processing information. The general theory, like having a theory such as like the Gestalt psychologist did, or like Freud's theory of psychoanalytic theory is like, it feels a little bit too ambitious to me. Like, and while you are trying to explain all of this, you usually lose your ability to refute, because you are trying to explain everything. You are trying to fit it into all of the data, but there will be a lot of noise. Sometimes you won't know, like you won't know. Maybe it's a null result. Maybe it's like a result that is really weak. Like when you try to fit it to all of the data, you lose your ability to do the science in the way that it should be done. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure that you could be able to create this like, or it wouldn't be like the work of one person. Like we will need like 200 more years, like 300 more years. Right. Yeah.
You refer to a person saying memory can't be found out, or I don't know. Can you explain that further?
I mean, in general, so the idea is that like you cannot have any. I mean, is there a law of memory? So that was the.
What are they referring there by law of memory?
I mean, like the whole idea of determine. Yeah. So, for example, you know, like when we are defining memory, we are defining it in different ways, right? Like, so we have all of these phenomena. Like testing effect, generation effect, you know, like self-reference effect. You know, like so these are long-term memory phenomena. But then, like when you are talking about long-term memory, you have like more conscious way of dealing with memory, like where people are intentionally recalling back information versus like when they are not really intentionally recalling information. So classical conditioning is one version of it. Priming, which is like your ability to get faster when you have been presented with related material, like is another one. Your procedural knowledge, so the things that you know to do, like walking, talking, like playing any kind of sports, like dancing, playing an instrument, so all of these things that are done with muscles. Most of the time, like this is the information that you use without even realizing you are using. So like even within those, like you do find a lot of differences. Okay. So if you are, for example, looking at amnesic patients, usually their ability to like for their implicit memory, this non-declarative unconscious memory stays intact even when like you cannot consciously recall this information. So there is this like really famous case of Agem. Agem is this guy who was having all of these like seizures throughout his young adulthood. So the doctor said, okay, like it seems to be caused by this medial temporal lobe like electrical activity. What we'll do is like we will surgically remove the medial temporal lobe of this person.
And let's see
what happens. So the results were not, I mean, he never had seizures. The problem though, like he was not able to form any new long-term memory. So like anything that happened after the surgery and even like a little bit before the surgery, he doesn't like consciously recall back, right? So he's not able to have this like conscious recall of information. But if you teach him any kind of like procedure, so like there was this like mirror drawing task. So like you don't, there is a mirror right in front of you, and like and you cannot see your own hand. You have to draw the figure on the paper by just looking at the mirror. Obviously, when you are doing that, everything needs to be done in the opposite manner, right? So initially, it's a difficult task to do. but like once you learn, you can get better at it as time passes.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, for example, for HM, like these experimenters are coming in every day. Like he's doing this like mirror drawing task, right? And then like you know, after a while, he actually got much faster, much more efficient, like much better, and like to the extent that like when these people came, like he would be just sitting there, like going in front of the mirror and start drawing these figures in a very, you know, like non-flexible manner. But then like you ask him, hey, like how did you learn about this? And he has no idea.
I just do.
Like, yeah, and like you do see this like pattern with a lot of like amnesic patients. So like what they try to do again, like they are okay on the level of habits. So if you can still establish habits for these people,
right.
And because you can establish those habits, like they can do the same thing in the same way over and over again. It's just that like they don't remember it, and if you ask them,
their muscles still do.
Yeah. But also like if you ask them to change the task, they cannot so flexibly do that. So again, it's like automatic processing, habit formation, you know, all of that stuff.
Very hard to approach with one theory in mind. Yeah, I can see that. And do you think memory can't have a law, one law? Yeah, again, like it's the problem of refutation, right? Like, I mean, like if you are trying to fit all of the data into this one theory, you are going to make too many assumptions about the theory. You think memory is also like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have been doing many experiments in cognitive psychology about memory. Do you use it in the class as well to teach the students better to make better memory formations?
I try. I don't know like how successful I am at that. Like, I mean, there are things. I try. I mean, one of the things I do is, I think the way that memory works the best is like if you are learning a new piece of information. Like you have to integrate it with what you already know.
Yeah.
Okay. So like every single time, like I'm teaching a new concept, there's this like integration with what the students already know, like coming up with examples.
And that's what you refer to as real-world applications.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they all get to the same thing in the end. But the thing is, you know, like memory works the best if the students try, right? Like, so if they put in the effort, again, like, it turns out that, you know, like, they keep on asking me, hey, like, is there a magical way as to how I can, like, my answers are so typical, so boring in general. Sleep well, pay attention, eat well, do physical exercise. So, like, for the older adults, for example, the thing that seems to make them, like, have better memory or, like, better cognitive functioning is like their level of physical activity. Like, so like the mind is working on a physical basis. Like you cannot really completely.
Very, very recently, I've seen something that says even misremembering something is like the more forgettable the person is, smarter he is. That there is this new article that I've seen. And it says something similar to this at least. Do you have any idea about that?
I don't like. Can you give me?
It's like not amnesia cases, but when you compare a normal person with a smart person, apparently there seems to be smart people seem to be more forgetful. Which is
You know what it might be? I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know the like root of like origin, like where it comes from. But like when you are thinking about I mean, I also don't like the idea of like smart versus normal person all that much. Because I mean, I do think that people. Like, I mean, that doesn't feel right. Also, like, people do have like different talents, like in different areas and stuff.
I definitely agree.
But I mean, I think the idea is like, if you are talking about, you know, like people being more forgetful. About what again? Like, there's also that. So, are you like absent-minded in your real life, but like you are remembering all of the theories that you really need? So you know, like we have a math professor in BCAT. Like he always keeps on telling me, I know none of the formulas. I need to reconstruct them every time I go to the board. So the idea is that do you have the tools to be able to like reconstruct this? So what might be happening is that like you know some very specific rules that will allow you to reconstruct that like specific facts later on in a reasonable way. So that might make you more capable, like smart, or whatever you want to call it, you know, like in terms of, but I mean, I'm not exactly sure about
that makes a lot of sense though. I mean, it would explain a lot, I guess. Also, the next question, you have been following the career path in psychology quite a while now, right? I think you never diverged.
No, I never did. Oh, I had like 1 year of market research experience, which wasn't for me. But I was always in psychology.
Yeah. Which part of the career have you enjoyed the most and why?
I think I do enjoy all. Like, I mean, I know it's a stupid thing to say, like it's a very, again, like boring thing to say. So, I mean, like, for one thing, like, okay, so like, because of my like 6 month or 8 month long market research experience, I knew that I wouldn't be part of the corporate life in a way. Because I felt that like you cannot ask your own questions, right? Like you are under the like control of somebody who you might not really agree with, who you cannot deal with, like who you do not find to be inspiring, whatever it is. Like it might be sometimes like very like uninspiring and for me. So one part of the thing that I liked about doing research was the fact that like on a very small scale I was able to control my own life, right? Like so I can ask whatever question I like. Obviously, you know, when you are in your doctoral degree, when you are doing your master's degree, you need to be in line with your professors like general topic of interest, but I mean we were doing long-term memory. But the idea that like you are able to ask the question that you want to ask is something very like important to me, essential. And then like you are able to follow up on it, you know, like through years, through different projects, through different understandings. And like, I mean, even the fact that you can refute your own like findings later on, hey, like this doesn't work in this like area, and being able to draw these boundaries in terms of like what is known, what is not known, how much you can know, is a lovely thing. And I mean, while you are creating this, you are coming up with creative ways, right? Like it's not like you have like one way of solving a problem.
You can play around and have fun.
Yeah. And I mean, the second thing about the research is like you are collaborating with people, you are sharing ideas, you are, you know, like thinking about like what you can do, what you cannot do. Like you keep on like, this will not work, this will work. Hey, let's like borrow this like specific paradigm from perception. Let's borrow this paradigm from decision making. Whatever it is, you are borrowing all of these paradigms and putting them together in a very original way. So that makes the research part fantastic. Now, from the teaching part, again, I mean, the idea of being able to share this knowledge, right?
Yeah, and share ideas.
Share ideas, like, I mean, I don't love the grading part. That seems to be one. That seems to be the one thing that I don't really like about my job. But otherwise, in general, and I mean, also, there is something about young people, like that, like the fact that you can actually point. I mean, again, it will be them who will need to figure it out, but like you suddenly sometimes see their eyes light up during class time. It's like all of the stuff that I was thinking about, and suddenly it all comes into like some kind of understanding, and you understand that they understand, and that's like a lovely, very satisfactory feeling to have, you know, like being, and you do learn from them a lot too, right? And the energy, like the level of energy that like younger people have, keeps me young, honestly. Like, I mean, so I do like most parts of my job in general.
Except grading.
Grading. Administrative stuff is not lovely either, but
yeah, manageable at least. Which one of these have you struggled with the most? Undergrad, grad, I don't know, PhD, research?
Which one?
Have you struggled with the most?
Let me just think. What do you mean in terms of struggle?
I don't know, thinking of quitting, doing worse, I don't know.
During my PhD, there was a time I was like pretty low on my resources. So, like, you know, so I went to the States, having already completed my master's. During the first 2 years, you know, I was doing research with my advisor. You know, like I was doing what, you know, he was like an expert in, like we were working together, all of this stuff. And then like there came a time where I had to determine like my PhD topic, right? Yeah. And that was difficult because you feel like you have a lot of options, but then you want to be able to use your advisor's expertise, and they are telling you, hey, I can only, you know, like advise you on these topics. But then, like, you have so many questions, but it is difficult to, you know, like, bring them together. You know, like, one of the loveliest things about cognitive psychology is that, like, you pit theories against each other, right? I mean, that's the most lovely thing. But, you know, on a theoretical basis, you can do that. But, like, when you put them into action, it's difficult. And so, like, that's time while I was like trying to figure out this question, it was a difficult time. Like I was not as quick as I would like to be. Like I felt stuck.
Okay. So what did you need there to, like, if you could advise someone who is right now in this situation, what would you say?
Give it time. I mean, hopefully you do have time, like, and like read a lot, like, I mean, and try to, and just realize that, like, by doing a PhD thesis, you are not going to save the world. I mean, I hope you do. But, like, what you are gonna do is, like, contribute just a little bit of more knowledge. It doesn't have to be your biggest project, your biggest success in life. Like, there will be other projects through which you will be able to, like, solve many more problems.
Take your time and don't rush.
Don't rush. I mean, again, like, you are sometimes limited by your programs, like, length. But, you know, like, try to give it time to come up with, like, a sound question. And be able to come up with, like, a design, take advice, get support from your friends, like, or like family, or, you know, like significant others, because, you know, like, you cannot really do this alone all the time. Like, you need others, like, to help you emotionally, support you emotionally,
Because you basically throw yourself out there with your idea and you project it to the whole world, and
yeah. Another part that was difficult for me was like right as I finished my PhD.
Yeah.
So like around that time, like the economic crisis in the States was still sort of like going on or persevering in terms of like faculty jobs, like postdocs and all of that. So like you do apply to so many jobs. And like you don't even get like, and they ask you to like send in all of these documents, and that needs to be like tailored to those like departments, those universities. So like you research 60-70 positions, and like your advisors, your recommenders send all of these recommendation letters, and you don't even get a response. Like that part was the thing that wore me down the most. Like
because it's basically meaningless. All the work you do is
I mean that's what it's not meaningless. It's just like so difficult. And I was lucky. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, like think about this. Like as an advisor, you like. I mean, my advisor from PhD probably like graduated so many PhD students. There is no chance that all of these people can go into academia, right? So like it's a prison scheme in some way. So you don't always have the chance, like you don't always you are not guaranteed that like you are going to be an academic. But if you really want to be an academic, how long do you persist in like doing that? So that was a very difficult period, I'm not gonna lie. Like being able to find a job like that, that was good enough. That was actually like giving me satisfaction. I mean, I was like, do I go into industry? Like I have like a very specific set of skills. Like what type of industry do I go into? I mean, you do have all of these like presentation skills. You do have the ability to write, ability to ask questions, ability to think critically. Like all of these are like assets. But when you are coming,
still didn't do that in the industry yet. So I understand what you mean. Skill set.
So I mean that's going to be difficult for anyone who is actually looking for a PhD degree. Actually, I'm not gonna lie.
So if you went into industry, what would you do?
Oh, what would I do? I would still do like teaching research. I think like I do really like it. So like how can you actually educate people to educate others? I mean, it's kind of funny though. Like, I mean, if you're like thinking about the education of teachers, education of professors, university professors, we are never given any education about how to educate others. There is no pedagogy. There is no like. They don't tell you how to teach.
There's supposed to be meta teaching. Definitely.
And you never get it. Like, but I mean. So
it's
like
an intuitive thing to do, but there should still be some sort of education or some sort of test at least to like we make them better or on age.
I mean I think I would like to do that. I don't know. I mean the problem is this, like as a professor you teach your students in a certain way. And if it works, at least it works for some of the students, you kind of like accept, okay, so this is working, I'm gonna keep it. You get all of these evaluations, but the evaluations might not necessarily always matter either. So the problem is, I mean, if it's like a well thought out evaluation, I will consider it, no problem. But students, I mean, as a researcher of memory, I know that like people do not really have a good idea of how much they have learned. So like sometimes like I don't take them seriously to the same extent. Like, I mean, if you are telling me something very specific about my teaching, I'll be happy to consider it. But if you are telling me that I'm not grading you right, like that I'm too strict in grading, I don't know, like the problem is this, like, so part of the reason that people might think that you are strict in grading is because they don't really know the topic and they don't know how they don't know, right?
Yes.
So like they think that they deserve this grade, but it's like, no, you don't have these like critical terms that need to be there that were like really emphasized during class time. So
it would be a good Dunning-Kruger study, I guess, to like match the grades with the evaluations and see how much they think they learned, but graded badly.
But I mean, here's the deal. So, like, if you are looking into any kind of research methods course, like, I mean, think about any, you know, like, shopping experience, like, too. Like, who are the people who write the reviews? Like, it's the ones that were really happy and the ones that were really, really unhappy. So, you know, I also look at, like, out of 65 people, how many people submitted reviews, like, evaluations. If it's like 5 people, like, what happened to the other 60 people? They were like, it's alright. Let me just not take the time to make an evaluation, which is good enough. So I mean,
you should sometimes settle with good enough. How useful did you find the masters in psychology before the PhD?
It was a good experience. So
and what's the story?
So like I just got into the psychology department by chance, right? So I, you know, like during my time, like what were the like topics that were, you know, like popular? Right now it's psychology and law. At this, in the past they weren't. So it was international.
Newly formed.
What's that?
Back then, right? The psychology departments were opening.
I mean, I think, I mean, there wasn't much, there weren't many departments around, definitely. There weren't many universities around either, so you know, like the international relations, political science, management, like were the, like, you know, these like departments that were very popular. And I don't know how, there was sociology, psychology. I was like, let me just like, so I sort of wrote them out in a very, like, whichever one was the highest, like, got the first place, right?
Yes.
So, I'm from Istanbul, so like, the first ones were like, Boğaziçi, and then like I had like METÜ, Middle East Technical University. So I happened to get into like Middle East Technical University, and like, you know, I had like no particular passion for psychology. I don't think like by the time that you are 18 you really know what you're doing anyway. So like I go into my first class. So we had this professor who was teaching the intro to psychology class, Umur Talasli. He was a cognitive psychologist. He was a professor of cognitive psychology, and apparently he doesn't usually teach that course.
So you were lucky.
So like I go in and this guy comes into like the class, no notes, nothing. Like he's just like talking out of like his memory with like a blackboard chalk in his hand, and he's incredibly fluent. He is incredibly like well informed, and I loved him. Like first I loved him, and like when he was teaching Intro to Psychology, he was mostly focused on cognitive psychology. So he was talking about research methods, but he was giving examples from cognitive psychology, and I'm like, I like this guy. So, and I mean, then like I took like 4 more classes from him. I was very lucky in that sense, and like you could see how like passionate he was. I mean, I liked other ones too. So, but like my questions always went back to, in some way, memory. Like I don't know why, like how, because like I do believe that like memory determines who you are. All of what you know about yourself, like all of your conditioning, all of your like actual recallable memories, unrecallable memories, they determine who you are at this moment. Like it is very difficult to be devoid of that.
That they're often wrong. Yeah.
What do you mean? That they are not. Yeah, you cannot recall accurately. Yeah, but I mean, there's like some way in which you recall yourself. You have an impression of yourself. You have an impression of other people, whatever. And like always went back to that question. But the problem was this: like during that time, cognitive psychology was not popular at all. Like people did not know about cognitive psychology at all. So I went to Koç to get my like master's degree, and like I was like, where can I actually do cognitive psychology and memory? Like because there is no cognitive psychology like program. So the developmental program was a place in which I was like, okay, I'm gonna go into developmental psychology and look into these memory questions.
Okay.
And so I worked with Sami Gülgöz there at Koç. He was great, like he taught me a lot. He taught me how to love science, like how to do science in the first place. And I mean, it was actually a trial period for me. Like, is it something, this like doing research, is it something that I like?
Yeah.
So I got to test it out for a couple of years. And then like I worked for a year at this like not for a year, full year, 8 months, 7 months, something like that.
Yeah.
At this market research company as I was applying for PhDs, by the way. So I was convinced that like I really wanted to do this.
Alright.
So like it helped me determine, is this like what I want to do, how I want to do it. And I mean, like, once I had the chance to go to a PhD, obviously I chose like a cognitive psychology program rather than a developmental psychology program, because I was not as interested in the questions of development as I was in like basic mind processes.
Sure.
Yeah, so it helped.
And you got what you wanted in the end.
Yeah.
All right. Other than these people you mentioned in the master's and in the PhD and in the undergraduate, are there other people that influence your path in psychology?
I don't know. I don't think so. Not that much. No. Like I mean, obviously, like there are all these people I follow, like in terms of like their research. But I don't think like from a personal perspective that like beyond my like undergraduate, graduate and PhD advisors, like I followed anybody's path as much.
I see.
I mean, I think that there is like a general, like, okay, so this is what you do now, you keep on thinking of the next step. But there wasn't anyone like I was like, oh my god, like this is who I want to be when I grow up. I think like it's like possible to have that. I just didn't, I think. Yeah. I mean,
at least, yeah. So you have been studying memory, but I see some recent articles about attachment and relationships as well. And I was trying to see which one you were in, but I guess you're in both, but I don't know the whole story.
So, I mean, basically, that was not like my main area. So one of the students who's like advisors actually, left the university, and went to another university. So I was advising. So in the meanwhile, I had like some. I have like one online dating and memory experiment, like with one of my students, like Samet. So that was actually, like all about lying and how it affects memory. And when I first wrote an article about like lying and how it affects memory and metacognitive processes in general, I was using very basic semantic level questions. So you were lying to general knowledge questions. So let me give you an example. So what is the color of blood? Instead of saying red, you say purple. Like whatever it is, like some other color than red, right? So so the reviewer said, is this really lying? Like you are just generating incorrect information, I mean,
I can see what he means.
From a cognitive perspective, I mean, you are that's like operationally defined as lying because you are trying to twist the truth, and like you might be, like creating some kind of like motivation. Hey, you really need to make this other person believe that the color of blood is purple or whatever. I mean, you could do that. But then, I was thinking about, okay, so this is a semantic question, right? Like, because it's about meaning, it's like a general knowledge. So what do people lie about, like, that is semantic? So at that point, I realized, like, dating sites. Like, man, this is the place where people do a lot of lying about their status, their, like, amount of money, how tall they are, how much,
salary they get,
like their character, like how, whatever. People do lie a lot on dating sites, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about like some episodic event that they live through. It can be about something that is semantic. So, like we started doing this research on like lying, and we wanted to give it like some kind of like practical cover. So it was like we like took questions.
Collect the data here.
So what we did was like to come up with questions about like dating, like that are in these like dating sites, like they make you answer a bunch of questions about your height, about your weight, about physical appearance, about like many different things. So like we came up like with a bunch of questions, and we told people, hey, like consider yourself that you are like responding to questions on a dating site, and like for some of them you will have to tell the truth, some of them you will have to tell a lie, but then like you will have to remember them later on because you might be meeting the person who is actually like reading your responses. So like that was the way we kind of tried to do it. Again, we asked the semantic questions over there. If you ask episodic questions, that can lead to different types of responses. But like the idea was, if you are lying to somebody saying that like you are 180, like in terms of height, even though you are 176, will you remember this response? Like to what extent will you remember this response? So that's what we were trying to figure out. Like, but I mean, it was, and like whether you think you will remember the response. So because
and what did you see? Are people good at keeping up with their lies, or?
No, depends on how they have to answer the questions. So, for example, if you tell them, hey, tell me about your life, so they are doing free recall, like we ask them, hey, you responded to all of these questions, like, now tell me about yourself, as if like you are talking to a date. But you will need to remember both your truthful answers and deceptive answers. Okay?
Yeah.
So when they do this, they do remember their truths and lies to the same extent. Okay. So like there isn't much of a difference in terms of remembering it. But if they are being asked the question, actually what happens is they remember their truthful responses more. So like if I ask you, hey, what is your height? they may not necessarily remember whether they told the truth or the lie to it, and they keep on telling the truth during like this like retrieval of information. Wow. So depending on like how you ask the question, the responses like that they will remember that are deceptive versus truthful are going to change too.
Okay. Can you say based on this, people tend to tell the truth more? Because you said they revert back to the true answers when you ask them.
I mean, obviously, remembering the truth is easier.
Yeah.
And especially, you know, like if you like put a time being, I have a feeling, you know, like there is this idea of like source monitoring. So, which means when you are lying, you actually have to remember that you lied, and you have to remember which lie you told, right?
Yeah.
Like, so depending on what type of lie, so the further you get away from the time of lying, the more are the chances that you are going to go back to truthful information, because you cannot monitor the source anymore. But I mean, if we are actually applying it to real life, I think the results could be different. Why? Because, you know, sometimes it's really important for you to be able to tell the same lie over and over again. To evade arrest, for example, right? I do watch these like true crime shows, and I look at investigations all the time, and like the detectives keep on asking the questions over and over again, like to get the person to catch them in a lie in general. So like, but I mean, sometimes the same person will tell the same lie, and if the other side cannot prove it, like, they are going to evade arrest, right? So
they find out in the end, if you did this experiment in like real life app like Tinder, what would you? Is there a process of doing this or no?
Oh, that would be very difficult, and you would need to get like consent from the. I think there might be ethical issues. So you might remember this, like a few years back, Facebook did this like mass experiment on contamination of emotion, I think. I cannot exactly remember. So what they did was to manipulate the news feeds of people, and they either like used negative like messages that people like. So when people looked at it, they would see the negative messages, you know, like the other friends posted, or they would see positive messages that friends posted, and depending on, you know, like what they got, maybe they're like I think their status, like how positive they were in their own status, changed. I'm not exactly sure about the results, but I mean the idea was like Facebook never got any kind of like consent from all of these people, and what they said is like, hey, this is like public data. When people like sign up for Facebook, like they already
up for this.
They are already signing up for this. That's what's like. It's like part of the stuff, but it creates quite a critical ethical concern, because it's like, because you're also changing people's like. By using these algorithms, you are making them feel better or making them feel worse. Are you taking any precautions, you know, to revert them to their normal situation? So, in Tinder, this will be very difficult.
But can you ask for consent from the ones that are already in this? Like not manufacturing new data, but taking existing data from the ones who give their consent.
I mean, if you had like a method to do that, that could be interesting to do, obviously.
But if you lied, you wouldn't, I guess.
See, the problem is like whenever you are getting into the field, your control decreases too much, right? So I always think about it like some people are better off in field research, some people are better in labs. I do, I think, better in a control freak environment for myself. I want to control like as much as I can. Once you go into these like more like uncontrolled experiments, it is more difficult to interpret the data. People do fantastic stuff. I love what they do. I don't know that I will be able to do that. And this is coming from a person, by the way, you know, like during some of my research, I do like provide food recipes. So people have to like watch food recipes and then like remember those food recipes, which is like pretty much like what you would have on like Netflix, you know, because you know like what we do is like we also mess up the signals for perceptual input. So as they are watching this, either the sound goes like or it goes bad, or the visual output goes bad, and like we are trying to see whether people think that they will remember their this like food recipe versus they will actually remember it. And even like this is like a very, you know, field like translational research. It's like something in between lab and the field. You are still conducting it in the lab, but you are using more naturalistic and dynamic material and stuff. Even then, like my control freak side is like dying, right? Like trying to make sure, are these really equivalent, like all of these food recipes we have? So like going into any kind of social media dating site or whatever really freaks me out. I mean, again, I do love what people do. It's just that I don't think like I will be feeling comfortable doing that.
I definitely understand. You said you were doing experiments with the sounds and the visual outputs. Are you hoping to figure out what's going on in the background, or are you trying to figure out the implications of how well people remember? Like, do you want to like enhance the people's ability to understand, or do you just want to know how people remember?
Oh, I don't think like you have to...
They can influence both?
Yeah. So like when we are talking about meta-memory, we are talking about like a few things. One of them is like, so meta-memory actually refers to how you are able to monitor, regulate and control the information. So currently most of the experiments that I run are looking at how you monitor your like own like memory processes. Technically, you are not really good at that. Like there are systematic factors that seem to affect it. So fluency being one, meaning like if something feels hard to you, it's not like as fluent. It's not as like easy to understand, easy to perceive, easy to like manipulate. You have a tendency to think that you will not remember it, right? So like part of it is to understand like whether like fluency always affects memory and meta-memory meta-memory in the same way. So basically there are 2 points of view. One of them is that like, and we know that typically if something is fluent, people have a tendency to think that it will be remembered better. All right. So like why? So one of the questions is why, and the why question is like they do have two theoretical like thoughts. One of them is that like you are automatically again like deciding on this. You have no consciousness involved. You are just like once you see this like fluent or this fluent information, you are making this judgment on a very like basic way without actually realizing it.
Looking at the cues. Yeah.
Using the cues. The other way is like what they are saying is that it's just a belief, right? So like when the participant comes into the experiment, they actually like are trying to figure out what's going on. So if you give them fluent versus disfluent material, they are going to try to like use this cue as a way to make judgments. So the decision is more conscious. Now, like, depending on whether, like, it's like fluency versus beliefs, like whether it is automatic versus effortful, like judgments, you can actually try to change it more or less. So if it's all on beliefs, maybe you can change the belief.
Yeah.
Again, like just like any other process that we were talking about, like sometimes you do know something, you don't, like you cannot change it. We don't know if we can change it. So, like on a theoretical basis, I'm looking at what's the mechanism behind it. How much of it is automatic, how much of it is effortful and conscious.
Yeah.
On the other side, I'm looking at the practical implication. Like if they know that this is a belief, can we potentially change it? So, so I'm trying to get to both. So, and they do affect each other. It turns out that even if it's a belief, it becomes difficult to change.
Oh no.
I mean, probably like there are different. So, like just telling people, hey, this is not something that you have to take into consideration, doesn't really work. Like maybe like giving them the experience works. Right? So we do work on a few experiments that actually looks at like, hey, like if we do multiple like learning testing sessions, can we change this belief in a more efficient manner?
Yeah.
So I try to get to both of these in the experiments.
You mentioned since they know they're in an experiment, they're somehow in a different state of mind when they're having this intercepted, I guess, inputs.
Yeah.
How do you think it changes the results of the experiment? I don't know. Do you see much of an influence there? I would assume it wouldn't affect that much since memory is not that cognitively aware of from our perspective, but it could be also.
I mean, one of the results that you find with any kind of manipulation, so even if it's like, even if you think about memory as like a sort of uncontrolled process, whatever manipulation you do, if you do it as a within subjects manipulation, right, you do seem to get differences more obviously as you would than like as a between subjects. So I'm getting one condition, you are getting one condition, versus I'm getting both of the conditions together. So this is like, I mean, sometimes considered within the idea of demand characteristics. So this is one of the things that we look into as well, right? Like, so if we are having this experiment as a within subjects design versus a between subjects design, are we getting similar results? So for example, with the lying experiment, so the idea is, in a bunch of experiments we looked at like whether like telling a lie actually affects like whether you will remember the information versus not, whether you will remember it. Now, like if you are having a free recall experiment and the within subjects design, participants when they lie, because it is more effortful, it is less fluent, it takes a longer reaction time, they do have a tendency to think that they will remember the lie less. But if you give them a free recall test, recall all of the truthful and the deceitful information that you had like told during the encoding process, they do remember their lies more than the truth, at least with general knowledge. But this is a within subjects design. Now, when you change it into a between subjects design, like, so there is a group that is getting both, like both truths versus lies. The other group is getting like only telling lies. The other group is only getting telling truths. Okay? So when you do this, you actually stop seeing results in both like metacognition and memory. Like in both of them, reaction times stay the same. So like, but reaction times do not technically are not reflected in these judgments. So one of the ideas is that if it's an automatic process, like this, like coming up with a judgment about your memory, if it's less fluent, you are having difficulty, your reaction time should be making the difference, right? Like the longer the reaction time, the lower your judgment should be.
Yeah, because it's less influence.
Yeah, like that. If that's what we are saying, but like now, like the reaction times are very slow in lying, very fast in telling the truth, but these are not reflected in the judgment. So at least we know that like there is some kind of baseline through which we are judging ourselves. So like if the baseline is presented to us at that very moment, we are like having this differentiation, making this differentiation more easily. But if the baseline is not there, you don't make that judgment so easily. Like you don't have a basis by which you can do the judgment. And I mean, this is something you see in decision-making processes too. One of the things that they do at grocery stores, right, is like they, for example, put like many different wines side by side. You need to get something. So the idea is that, you know, like you don't want to look too cheap, you don't want to get something too expensive, so you get the one in the middle, which is relative. Well, what does the grocery store do in order to make the wine? They put a very expensive wine. Now your baseline is changed because there's that like expensive wine. You choose a little bit more expensive wine than the middle one because, you know, that like specific thing is there. So we use these relative conditions to judge our performance. And if that like other condition is not there, we might not be judging it in the same way. And this like is reflected in memory processes, in decision making for why. It's reflected in a lot of different types of truth judgments the same way. Like so we do see same processes in different cognitive same things, like same results happening in different cognitive processes.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much we could be manipulated using these in truth situations, because they can feed you with the wrong information first and then the second too, and when you come to the third you expect truth now, but yeah, they can put different orders so that you are tricked, which kind of sucks, but yeah.
I always think, you know, like there's this type of people who is like, oh, nobody can deceive me, I am a like judge of character. I do think it's all about context. Like any of us can be, you know, like deceived. Any of us can be like manipulated. It's just that like depends on a bunch of context, whether you are getting feedback, whether you are not getting feedback. So it's important to be humble about all of these situations.
Of course. You studied rotation and inversion and takes that, and you concluded they don't affect the ability to memorize according to a study of yours. Do you have any idea why this is so? Why rotation and inversion doesn't change the recalling ability or judgments of recalling ability?
It doesn't change the judgments. It sometimes changes the actual performance, actually.
Okay.
So, I mean,
fluency hypothesis works.
Yeah. So the fluency hypothesis doesn't really work. See, this is one of the boundary conditions. So, you know, like usually, typically, if you have like some kind of perceptual difficulty during the learning, it seems to affect judgments of learning such that people have a tendency to judge the disparate information less favorably. So if something is easy to perceive, you give it higher judgments of learning. Now, but most of the time, the differences between the two conditions are, well, like there's like a good timing difference, right? So it's like 200 milliseconds, so which is like 1/5 of a second. It doesn't feel like much, but it is quite a bit. Like once like you are having that difficulty, you do feel it. Now, my guess, this is just a speculation, with the mental rotation, the differences between the fluent and the disfluent conditions are not that identifiable by the participants. So the idea is that they are not having let's say that in a certain manipulation, the difficult condition takes you 800 milliseconds, the easy condition takes you 500 milliseconds. Okay, so that's something that the humans can realize. There's a difference in between the two.
Yeah.
With the rotation task, the difference seems like 600 to 500, right? So it's the difference is only not that much. So I think part of it is that we are not sensitive enough to realize the difficulty. Again, which speaks to it being conscious, right? Because if you don't realize that there's a difficulty difference, you don't use it in your judgments. So I think that's part of it.
Right.
But I mean, even telling people, hey, this can change your performance, might also create changes in how you are going to spare your cognitive resources during the learning process. That's one of the other findings that we got from this research.
How much do you see self-fulfilling prophecies in these studies?
Self-fulfilling prophecies.
They judge they are gonna do well, but do they?
So again, it's going. I mean, obviously, I do believe that self-fulfilling prophecies really guide our learning. If you believe that you are not going to learn it, no matter what, you are not going to pass that calculus course, right?
Exactly.
But so within these experiments, usually you might not usually believe that you are going to remember this information, but if the manipulation is within, you are going to have a judgment difference no matter what. So your calibration might be lower. So somebody who is really trusting themselves, for the fluent condition, they might say, I'm going to on average remember 80% of the words versus 60% of the words. For the person that is less confident about themselves, there will still be that difference, but they will maybe from 40 to 20, right? You will, within subjects design, you will get the results a little bit more unambiguously there. I mean, so if the person is, so this is again an issue of calibration. So how accurate are you in remembering your performance? So it's really funny because I always have a bonus question in my exams at the end of the exam, asking my students, to calculate their to guess their score that they are going to get from the exam, and there will be these intentional people. I'm a metacognition researcher, obviously. So, I mean, there will be these people, and it's really funny to see, who will actually go into every question and give themselves a grade for each one.
I used to do that without prompting.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, you see these people being really accurate because they're actually calculating, and if they sort of have an idea about their own stuff, they can calculate it. But I mean, people are so different. So you see people who are getting 100s and calculating their predicting their score to be 80, being underconfident.
Wow.
And then you will see people who are getting 30s, barely. You kind of wonder whether they were ever in class, and getting 30 and then thinking that their performance is going to be 70. So technically, what helps your performance is always being underconfident, because if you're underconfident, you have to work more. And usually with the highest grades, you see underconfidence. But I mean, I can also see it being a consequence of I don't want to say to the hoja that I'm going to get 100, like that I am that awesome.
Yeah, she's making me do this, I got it.
Right? I mean, but the idea is like I ask them to predict their score, and I tell them like you are only going to get the points if you are 5 points above or below this point, right? So they need to be accurate. Like I give them some motivation to do that too. Well, I mean, obviously, like it's going to. I mean, people are very different. So, for some people, it's going to be there, like self-fulfilling prophecies. I mean, obviously, if you believe I will never pass this exam, this can also change your like studying method. It can also change like how much you are willing to learn. It can change things. I can see self-fulfilling prophecies being important in real life learning. If in the experiments, I'm not exactly sure.
I see. Maybe teaching method might be like just before the exam, make them all underconfident. It's a very hard question.
Oh man.
In a lecture and that, yeah.
It's bad. Like, this is going to be so difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
But it can enhance performance, and if you don't change the questions, you basically just deceive and get good performance.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe someone.
I mean, it's going to lead to different results in different people too.
That's the.
So, like one of the theories says that, like, depending on how much time you have left, and depending on your like belief in yourself, the place at which you are going to, whether you are going to study the topics that are the easiest or like a little bit more difficult is going to change.
Right.
So, for example, if you don't have time, what you do is to try to master the easiest material, because those are the ones that you will get for sure if you study.
Yeah.
If you have a little bit of more time and you have like a little bit of more, like belief in yourself, people do focus on other parts too.
Yep.
So it does make a difference. Should we turn on the lights?
That was just what I was saying.
Oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
We can actually see each other.
Yeah, finally.
It was a romantic, moment we had.
Yeah, we need candles.
Science under the candle, with the accompaniment of candles. Yes.
Yeah. You have looked at ordered and disordered list memorizations. What are the insights that you and we can derive from this?
Ordered and disordered?
Like, there is this, from what I've seen, I'm not sure if this is entirely correct, there are lists and you tell people to memorize the lists, but the lists are sometimes ordered according to something.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe a very distant paper of yours, but I've seen something like this.
Yeah. I mean, order is going to make a difference, so like, it will also make a difference if you have prior knowledge or not, or if you ask people to remember things in order, they are going to prioritize like the incoming of the stimulus, and they might actually, because you changed their organization, they might remember in a different way if they were to remember in a free manner, okay? So, but I think one of the ideas also is that with the ordered and disordered lists is with these cooking lists, right? Cooking recipes. So in a recent paper, Eylül Ardıç, who is now a graduate student at WashU St. Louis, she was looking at these food recipes, right? And as she was looking at them in a couple of experiments, we looked at normal so participants were given like a full food recipe. So they would be like watching it and then like try to like remember the items. Then they would be given another recipe, try to remember like the list.
Yeah.
So, and we were also looking at their judgments, right, in general, like as to how quickly, like they were able to, how much like these perceptual disfluencies, like, I mean, if you try to contextualize this, think that like you are watching Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Like you're watching a cooking show, but your internet goes like from time to time. The signal is a little low, so you sometimes understand some things. You don't. Most of the time you do understand, but it's like a little like shaky, right?
Yeah.
Either the sound or the visual output is a little bit problematic. So, do you think that you will remember like this food recipe when you are trying to cook it later? And the second thing, will you actually remember it? So, it turns out that like if you have some kind of auditory like problem versus like a visual problem, and if it's this like normal recipe, the auditory information affects your judgments.
Wow.
So you don't think that you are going to remember the information if the sound is bad. Alright, but like the visual output does not make so much of a difference if it's an ordered list. Now, obviously,
is that because we are better at constructing mental images rather than mental sounds, or?
See, okay, I will get to that in a second. So when you are, but if you are looking at the memory performance, by the way, there is no difference across any of those conditions. People are doing perfectly in all of them, but the judgments, like whether they will remember the information, goes worse when it's like auditory material, right? So, it might also be that it's a food recipe and it's a bunch of instructions. Visual material, it's not. It's it just helps. But if you don't have it, you can still cook, right?
Why do you specifically choose cooking recipes, or are there other domains that we can...
See, okay, all right. I will get to that too.
Okay.
Just give me a second. No problem. So when we did this, in the normal recipe, so you have actually you can use all of your schemas, cooking instructions that you know from the past, because the recipes make sense, right?
Yeah.
And for example, if you used patlıcan, eggplant in the second step of the recipe, you are repeating patlıcan, even if it's given to you in a disfluent version. You can remember it from the previous item, from the previous step, right? So there are all these things that are helping you in your normal life when the information is not so fluent, is not easy to receive. You can use all of these prior knowledge to complete these deal with these issues. Now it happens that way in this ordered, schema consistent, logical list. Okay. Now in one of the experiments, what we did was, let's take the logic out of it. What did we do? We took these completely irrelevant items from the irrelevant food recipes. The moment we did that, first of all, the memory performance went down from 70% to 30%.
Wow.
People and it was much less in terms of items that we had there.
Yeah.
The second thing is suddenly all of these perceptual disfluencies started affecting the metacognitive judgments in the visual output as well.
Oh.
So depending on whether you have some
is it just, I don't know, what are the reasons behind it?
So now you cannot use logic, you had seen patlıcan, eggplant in the previous one. Now you cannot see the eggplant now. It's a completely different thing. There is no logical cooking order. You don't have any schemas. you just don't. It's more difficult to understand it because like again, like if you have seen the visual output before in some format, when it's continuous, there is some kind of logic, you can use that information to fill out the upcoming materials. So the order helps you.
And you can follow your head. So
you can. Yeah, exactly. But when it's not ordered, you are going to mess up because you cannot use the previous item to help you come up with like explanation of what you see on TV anymore. So also the visual information starts like bothering you. So like order makes a difference. Your prior ability to be able to use the prior knowledge makes a difference. I think everything comes down to that in the end. Like honestly, like order, disorder, like fluency, disfluency. If there is a way in which you can use some kind of script, some kind of narrative, some kind of like schema, even if the information coming to you is not that perfect, you can like make it more perfect or more reasonable, more rational. But if like you cannot use anything, your ability to be able to remember that information is going to change too. So like ordered and disordered makes the full difference, particularly if it's like some kind of a script schema that is being involved in the situation.
Did you ever try this on real, I don't know, scripts of text, like a person going down through the street and having an experience just writing of that? Does it change if the text is not a list of items, list of actions, but a person's
story?
Then caring would be involved, and the interestingness of the story.
I mean, definitely. I think like one of the problems we have in like experimental research is like everything is so devoid of context, right? So like you give these words, you give like completely like made up like manipulations that do not seem to involve real life. Obviously, the moment that you are making them a little bit more meaningful, you are losing some part of the control. I mean, it's very difficult.
You need to do those to get to those parts. I got you.
And I mean, I think I mean, at least I try to, like do it myself now, like by using a little bit more like real life like materials and stuff, and I think it does make quite a bit of difference.
I guess your coming up experiment involves noting down a YouTube video or something.
Oh, there is one, like so. So there is this like experiment. Are you talking about cognitive offloading experiments or no?
I guess, offloading,
So the idea is this, like, so if we are looking at these food recipes, like for example, so like, let's say that you were given the chance to write down notes about it. And like you think that you are going to be able to use them later on, versus you cannot use them later on. How is your performance going to change? Like how much are you going to offload this note? How much of it is going to be still in your mind? Because sometimes taking the notes might also help you like remember the information a little bit better, right? Because like you create the cues. But like when it's being taken away from you, how well are you, going to be able to do that? So like we are running an experiment with like young and old adults right now, trying to look at this, and actually with older adults it's a little bit less intimidating, I think, because it's food recipes, like it's something that they want to deal with. They are they are not as like
they don't have the time to deal with, but they can actually do that.
So that helps. But I mean, it's a difficult balance, I'm going to say, like, because the moment that you create these materials, every single time that you are trying to publish them, like some reviewer rightfully will ask, hey, how does it compare? Like you are like, for example, like for these like cooking recipes, we have to do a lot of pilots. Like how much do people actually understand the disfluent news, disfluent like versions of the items? How much like are the visual disruptions versus the auditory disruptions equal to each other, right? Like, why are you using food recipes but not football? Because, you know, like, again, like, these are all relevant questions. I mean, the reason that we use, like, the food recipes was, I'm trying to remember. It's very general, it's easy to, like, there is, like, procedure, and like it makes sense from like a naturalistic perspective. It's dynamic materials. Some, you know, like researchers are using instructor fluency, like whether the person is like a good instructor, like coming up with like very lively stuff, or are they like disfluent, not being able to talk, their voice is low, whatever it is, like how it affects student evaluation, student learning, and all of that stuff. I mean, it's not real. Like, I mean, they are again like making it up. Like the same instructor is like.
Yeah, further down the road, you would be able to do this if you,
But I mean, like, again, but I mean, it's like, again, like, I'm doing it for food recipes where there's a lot of instructions, auditory information is going to be important. Like, if you are looking at, say, football, right, like, and people are trying to play football, the sound goes, the, like, looks, the visual output goes, like, are you going to have the same kind of, like, results? I mean, I would guess like that in that instance, the visual output would be like, and the metacognitive judgments about the visual output would be more like articulated, and like they would be like prioritized as compared to the auditory ones. But then, like, you hear people saying, hey, like, when I'm watching soccer, I cannot watch it without a sound. Like, I need to have the, like, guy, like, say something and shout and, like, tell me about the, like, whole soccer game.
It's a really important business, especially in Turkey. Like, you can't even imagine how much we pay more to the speakers rather than, like, the Germany does.
You know, like, I'm always amazed, like, I can never watch soccer.
Me too.
Like, but I see, like, for example, cab drivers, like, they are pretty much in the game, like, they can completely visualize it. In the same time, I'm like, they are driving, doesn't it interfere their working, like, memory, and can they see what's in front of us? Like, I have all of these, like, concerns, but, like, they seem to be fine. But it's
most of the time they even drive better when there's sound of football.
Especially if the team is winning, right?
I am guessing since the automatic and like conscious memory comes up, effortful memory comes up a lot, we are not really similar to computers in remembering sense. Do you see some similarities, and what other differences do you see?
I mean, computer analogy was like one of the initial analogies that was used to like look at cognitive psychology. That's how cognitive psychology began. I mean, I think like computer analogy is more helpful when you are thinking about, for example, working memory processes. Because, you know, like, there is a RAM, you know, like, there is, like, limited capacity, only so much you can, like, experience, learn, whatever. With the long-term memory and retrieval from long-term memory, I mean, I'm not sure we are very similar. Because, you know, in any case with the computer, if, like, if the computer is performing a function, that RAM is going to be used, right? So, like, the automatic effortful process is not so well defined within that RAM. I mean, it might be that like one program uses so much more like of the RAM power, the other one uses much less. Like that could potentially perhaps talk to how you are recalling information from long-term memory, but it doesn't really work the same way. Like it almost feels like, you know, if you ask me, like, I mean, if I had to make some kind of like analogy, this is a non-existent computer. So you have one RAM that is running and like it has limited process, and like whatever you see over like on the screen is like whatever that RAM is like presenting you with. But there is another one right below it. You don't know what it does. You don't know how it does it. But it's still like from the background is controlling some of the visual output that you are getting. Like
without ever contacting.
Without ever contacting the other one. Oh, maybe they contact through this like part at which like your consciousness appears perhaps. But that's the feeling that I have about the whole, like, I don't think the computer analogy at least works for, like, all of these, like, long-term memory.
One can try and make a model out of what you just said. Would be a fun project, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, like, then you would be getting all of these weirdness in the output, right? Like, suddenly you have this consciousness, and every single time, he went a little berserk. That was the other red. I think that's what's gonna happen, right? But I mean, we are weird people, right? All of us have like some kind of oddity. So I think like,
do you see some connection with artificial intelligence in memory? Because apparently it sometimes remembers well, sometimes very wrong. Do you have any insights on ChatGPT's abilities? And coming up abilities?
I mean, it's a language model, right? Like, so it's like more related to how much text that the ChatGPT processed. I think it's like fantastic, honestly. Like, it can write a whole story out of this language model, and but I mean, so one of the problems is that the ChatGPT, for example, lies quite a bit, right? Like, all of this information that you like, honestly, on a certain level, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's about this, like, so. Okay, so let me just come from a certain place as to why I started working on memory. So, like, the idea is that the moment that we are born, like, we start, like, coming up with, like, I mean, we try, like, our self-identity starts, like, developing, like, we initially, like, up until 3-4, we cannot really understand the world is not an extension of ours. And then, like, it takes a while for us to realize, oh, this person can have a different point of view than myself, right? Eventually, like, you kind of have your more, like, because of all of the experiences that you have had, the genetic code, the cultural experiences, the sociocultural context, whatever contextual information you have had, starts shaping, like, what you are going to attend to, right? So, like, and the way that you attend to things is going to change what you are going to remember. And the way that you remember is going to change how you are going to act towards people. So this is the whole, like, self-fulfilling prophecy stuff, right? So your attention is, like, making quite a bit of difference. Now, like, and, like, you will remember stuff incorrectly depending on what kind of preconceptions you have about life, what kind of, like, hypothesis you have about life. During the day, we are exposed to 1 million, like, stimuli. I'm just making up the number right now. How many are you going to remember? 30. So you remember so so little, and those 30 that you are going to remember is going to be shaped by what you already know, what you believe in, what you stand for, and it's very difficult to change that like preconceived notion, right? Like, and like this is the confirmation bias too, right? Like you see a full text, like you take the part that you believe in, and it's very difficult, even as a scientist, to consider that other view that you do not believe in and where it's coming from. So like we are very different than this ChatGPT in the sense that like we are prioritizing some information over the other.
Yes.
ChatGPT will not have that. Like if it's processed 1 billion texts, it will take an average.
And
it won't be as biased as us, perhaps, you know, like there will be those changes. The second thing is like, I wonder, I don't know like how it works. So for our memory, why do we misremember?
When we take in, there's some things that are going wrong because our perception is so involved, and it's second, when we are remembering again, the cues are again involved, I guess.
So the idea is that, I mean, the reason that we misremember is like because of all of these like time. So technically you have all of these episodic traces like of the real truthful information, right? But like you also like reconstruct some part of the information depending on the context, depending on like what is around you, depending on what is rational. So if something does not fit your schema, you may not remember that information later on, right? So like so we are going to be biased and we are going to misremember with like in harmony with our preconceptions or like schemas, narratives, like whatever story we tell ourselves, right? But you know, like an artificial intelligence might not have the same thing. What they might be doing is like they don't have a preconception, they don't really care, like they are just taking an average to the extent that like it's a full average, because like some information is going to be conflicting the previous information. How is it going to decide? Like, so you need to write that part of the program which is going to determine how much it is going to be similar to our memory too. So like we have all of this built-in hypotheses like that are running in our minds that are controlling who we are, what we think, and how we are going to act as we move forward.
We are training all of these artificial networks with our own data, our human data. So we can possibly expect similar patterns at some point. Do you think it's a good idea to study the behavior of the neurons of the artificial networks to understand humans at some point?
It depends on how much of it you were able to mimic, right? And I have this feeling that we may not be able to mimic so well all the time, right? Like, I mean, it's going to depend. Again, like, we have so much experience, like, and our ability to infer from very little experience is so much more than artificial intelligence. Like, so the artificial intelligence can come up with this, like, lovely, you know, like, language, a little bit exaggerated too, but it won't understand the meaning of it itself. Like, we as humans are attributing meaning to it.
So you think there are some other processes that construct the mind? Yeah,
I mean, so like technically it's called the emergent properties. So there's something that happens at the level of the neurons that are like sort of random or like is educated in one manner, it's trained in one manner, right? So that will be one thing, but there might be all of these processes that we don't know, that we don't take into consideration, that are going to affect the humans but not the artificial intelligence, because we don't even know. So
that's the job of neuroscientists, I guess.
Good luck to them.
Not an easy task. The methods you apply while studying memories are very interesting to me in general. You had two types of images in one study of yours, ones that are complete and ones that requires participants to mentally fill in. How much is the difference there in the ability to remember in these images, and how do you construct these different types of experiments, different types of images? How much should you blur, how much should you cut out for the mental feeling inability?
Extreme piloting. So what you do is like you try to, first of all, like kind of have to make sure that the images, for example, if you want them to identify the image, the image should be named with the same thing, right? Yeah. Like if somebody is saying it's a computer, the other one is saying it's a laptop, that might be a problem. I mean, with the two, it's not too much of a problem, but there will be situations in which somebody will say something is a blanket, the other one will say it's a scarf, right?
Or
like
pictures of animals.
Yeah, like is it the same animal? Like are like. So I have this like image in one of my classes. It's this image of a squirrel, or I think it's a squirrel. So like in the exam, I keep on like seeing it as the image of a rabbit, right? Like the students think it's a rabbit. But I mean, like the thing that you need to have like needs to be nameable in the same way. Like people should be able to understand that it's a blanket versus a shawl. Yes. So that's the first thing. So if you are, for example, using some kind of blurring, some kind of like checkerboard pattern in complete image, you also have to like make sure that people can recognize it despite that like blurring that we have. And like you have to do a lot of piloting with different people to make sure, hey, like, yes, it's still a rabbit, not a squirrel. It's like still a blanket, not a shawl. Like, I mean, typically most of these experiments, so that's what makes like contextual experiments that have like any kind of like more naturalistic material even harder, because how much people are going to interpret is going to be more variable as compared to simple stuff.
How much does this part take for you?
For piloting? No, I mean sometimes like over the years, you know, I have been doing this for a while. I feel like I have developed a good instinct as to like what is right, what is not.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, like you have to test it. Like you have to make sure. If you don't, some reviewer will actually ask you to do it. It's like, let's do it in the beginning so that, you know, like we already know what's going on. I mean, once you set up like some kind of stimuli, you want to use it more than you do, especially if it's like a tiresome process, like cumbersome process. You want to use it for more than one experiment for sure, but the piloting, depending on what it is, takes forever.
I see.
Yeah.
You have studied also bold texts and I don't know other types of texts that for the study of this perceptual fluency hypothesis. How were the results and what are the insights?
Texts, like I haven't studied bold texts really. Like I have studied like various different types of perceptual response. Boldness wasn't one of them. Usually, typically, you find that like the boldness doesn't make like. So there was this like very, you know, like flashy title. What was it? Fortune favors the bold, and that they meant the and not the italics. I think like so. Technically, you know, like boldness sometimes affects the metacognitive judgments. It doesn't always affect the actual memory performance. That's what you find. But you know, but I mean, the results were very much like debated later on. It was a controversial result because a lot of experiments failed to replicate this result in general. I do use masked texts sometimes. Again, like in those, if you can mask them properly, usually like because participants are having more difficulty during the processing of that like masked information, sometimes they do remember it better as compared to information that is shown intact.
I see.
So masked versus normal sometimes makes a difference. But again, like it's going to depend on the parameters. So if you show it a little bit too long, it's not going to produce the results. Like people need to again put in the effort. I keep on going back to the same image, same message, don't I? Yeah. But it turns out, memory is all about effort. And like that's going to increase your chances of like learning. Yeah.
I see. Will you do any experiments with colors, like with different backgrounds for these cooking recipes? I don't know.
What would be the theoretical question for that? So I
Are there any difference?
Why would you think that there would be a difference between different colors?
Because possibly, I mean, if you could find one, it would change a lot of things. That's what I'm imagining, and maybe we have some more preference to natural colors such as green.
I see. Usually there isn't. So it turns out that again everything is more like meaningful in the meaning of context. So we do have a tendency to remember what is different than the rest. So if you have a list, okay, and some of the items are bold, some of the items are not bold, and the like proportion of bold items is less, you do have a tendency to remember them better. But if the most of it is bold and there's like a couple that is like normal without,
then you prefer
you prefer the normal ones. So again, like what makes the difference is not necessarily always the item or the perceptual properties of the item itself, but how it differs from the context. So when we are thinking about like perceptual fluency, I am wondering one of the issues is like perceptually this fluent stuff is different than what we see every day. Like we usually perceive the world in a fluent way. I mean, it's not only for perceptual stuff, by the way. Like like meaning-wise too. You know, things like we can complete things very easily. Maybe the disfluency attracts our attention because it's different than the context. So if everything was disfluent for us, we might have been able to remember the fluent stuff better. So that might also be making a difference. So I do believe that like looking at things from a view of context makes a difference too.
Yeah, an application might be directly like painting the blackboard's background to white so that it's more apparent, or the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you cannot see, you are not going to remember it because you didn't process this to begin with. But given that you are processing it, I don't know if it's going to be producing such different results. Like, I don't know. Like so for example, so one of the findings that you have with truth judgments, for example, this was a study by Unkelbach, I think. So what he did was to, maybe not, let me not get it wrong, like I can't remember the author right now. So it's either like low contrast items, like statements. So it's like light blue background, yellow writing versus black background versus white writing, and they wrote statements, right? And typically what happened was and then participants were asked, hey, how truthful do you think are these? So when the contrast was high, participants thought that it was more truthful as compared to when the contrast was lower. it's like a superficial surface characteristics that you should be paying attention to technically. But like people do pay attention to it.
And that's why Facebook actually influences people with those random things.
Yeah, it does, because like
background.
I mean, sometimes we take into consideration things that we should not be taking consideration into, and sometimes we fail to consider the things that are important, like sometimes, the content of the message, like.
Sometimes really all it takes is a good picture and a black background.
Right, yeah.
Well, it is. Very interesting result again. In one of your experiments, you also found out that attachment styles change in the short term with positive experiences, but not in the long term. Possibly not in the long term, but I want to get your idea on how do you think this is. Can the attachment styles of humans change in the long run as well, or no?
If you are moving from like avoidant to secure, it can possibly help. I mean, people do. So it depends on context again, right? So like if you have been so the attachment styles, why do they form? Technically, they form because you are adapting to the environment. So the idea is that if you have a caregiver that is sensitive, that is taking care of your needs, is there when you need them, and is not is letting you explore when you would like to. So you have a tendency to form secure attachments, and these initial attachments that you form can later on also be be also reflected in your later relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, adult relationships, all of that, right? But let's say that your caretaker was never there when you were young. Are you always going to avoid other people and try to be there? So technically you can perhaps change that too. Up to a certain extent. If you are pairing up with somebody who has secure attachment style, your chances of being able to revise how you again, it's a matter of how much you can notice I am avoidant and I try, but this is how I relate, just give me time, you kind of again, attachment is a two-way street, right? And it will need to it changes. Some people make you feel less secure. Maybe again they are more familiar to your initial caretaker who wasn't really interested, was neglectful. You cannot know that. So you might be attracted to those people too. So avoidant people seem to attract anxious attachment style, anxious avoidance. So one of them is asking, give me love, hey, are you there? I feel love. No, I'm not here. Well, but this type of
dynamic words.
Sometimes. Sometimes it can turn toxic. Again, it turns out to be a bunch, you need to be able to communicate with the other person, I suppose, to be able to, figure it out. Therapy helps, it's, again, everything is contextual, everything is, happening in a certain, it's not happening in a void. Some people increase the insecurities in you, right? And you are if you're if you have an anxious attachment style, you are maybe don't choose those people who are making you feel like this. Just, it's difficult though, making these rational choices, right? Because the other one might be so familiar to you too.
And developmental parts really matter in this case, which is something that you can't avoid. Yeah. What are the strategies then to like learn your attachment type so that you know yourself and what you need from the other?
I mean, it's not so difficult to figure it out. Like, I mean, like there are all these like scales like that can tell you, hey, like it seems like you are more, you know, like you want to be left alone. You are trying to be hyper dependent. Like you can figure it out like through therapy, through scales. Like you can kind of see how, like you see yourself, how your partner sees you, all of that. The question comes down to whether like you can change it, whether you want to change it. I mean, part of it is like maybe you are very happy being an avoidant person too. Like, I mean, the reason that you want to change it is like it's not working for your current experience, right? So depending on, I mean, it's whether you want to change, whether like to what extent can you change. Can you see your triggers, like what makes you more avoidant, what makes you like suddenly run away from the situation, what makes you feel anxious, can you communicate this anxiety to the other partner in a safe environment, is the other person going to understand you? There are all of these like dynamics that are going on there, so I don't know, like I mean it's going to first like first you will need to want to change. Like there's this like stupid joke, you know, like how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the story is like only one, but the light bulb wants to change. Needs to want to change, right? But I mean, like, I think, like, if you wanna change, you are going to have that, like, base, like, but, you know, like, you can be more aware and act accordingly. Like, you can change your behavior. I don't know if you can change your attachment style for sure. Like, you are going to get back to it, like, regress back to it at times of stress, at times of, like, conflicts.
Yeah.
So...
Okay. Let's ask a personal question related to this then, because it's super relevant. Since you know all these, you should kind of be able to judge yourself, I guess. Did you decide to change at some point?
I mean, I am a work in progress. So, you know, like, I do realize some things sometimes about myself, what triggers me, what's like problematic, what's like working, what's good, what's bad, all of that stuff. But, you know, like, changing takes so much effort. You need to have that leap of faith. Like that, like if you change, the result is going to be different. And even, you know, like I was talking about this with the students a few days ago, you know, like, you know, there's sometimes like something that you would like to change. Maybe you are too shy, you want to be more extrovert, like you want to be more outgoing or like interact more with people. And then like you do this move to be more interactive, and like the group turns you down, like which acts sort of as a punishment. So you kind of have to get your reinforcement or your feedback from yourself too, right? Like just because, like if you want to be outgoing and the group like actually, you know, like rejected you or told you, hey, this is not good, like you got that feedback. You can look at that feedback, but you can also take a look at, hey, I was here, I came here. So like you can only, you know, like compare yourself to yourself. And all you can do is to try to be, you know, like act a little more in line with yourself or what you want to be, more than yesterday. So I try. I don't know if I'm always successful. Some days I'm worse, you know, like I regress back. But, you know, I kind of try to be compassionate to myself too about that. I'm not always. Yeah. There is the judging me, like course. Talking to myself.
Everybody else.
But, you know, noticing them does not always automatically guarantee that you are going to change or you are going to resolve it. Even if you resolve it, actually you realize maybe I shouldn't have resolved it in this way. This has other problems. There's that too, but
then you're too outgoing and you don't have any close friends because you know everyone.
I mean, for like, I wasn't always, I was never really very shy, but I don't know how that works. But I mean, like, whatever it is that you are trying to change, change is not easy. Like, knowing the awareness helps a lot. But the change is going to require a lot of like small steps. And sometimes you are going to regress back.
True.
So you have to
keep going somehow. This is the last question. Are there other areas of psychology that you are going to study in the future as well? And if not, what are you going to do next in the research?
So I think I'm happy with memory, like in general.
I can definitely see that.
I do like what I'm doing. Like, I mean, one of the things that I want to do is like to be able to contextualize this information, obviously, like have more naturalistic paradigms, and be able to, you know, understand like how this works in context. But I don't see myself going away, like, I mean, moving away from the lab into field studies. You know, like, I am the control freak that I am in this situation, and I think I will keep on going that way. I want to have more insight as to how this, like, metacognitive monitoring work, like, control works. So, like, up to now, I have been doing a lot of, like, monitoring studies. How does it work? How do we monitor ourselves? What helps? What is like the current like understanding of our memory and our current understanding of metacognition? The other one that I mean, the next step is to understand. Okay, if it is this way, what can we do to improve it further? Like, how can we understand ourselves better in terms of memory? But, you know, like, what signs, like, make us learn better? What, you know, like, what are the systematic factors that we can change around? Like, because, again, as in any kind of behavior, we are not going to be able to change everything, it turns out. Like, what if we change actually helps us like have a better memory performance in general?
Enhancement of memorization abilities will come from external adjustments or internal ones?
Even if you do the external adjustments, which can help, the person still needs to like put in the effort. So I mean,
I was thinking of the case of Neuralink, for example. They're trying to. They will try to at some point come up with devices that enhance your memory abilities. So, do you think is it better to do that or change the environment accordingly based on the findings?
I don't know. I mean, one other thing that I am asking is like, when do you need to have your memory to be better? Like, for what instances, right? Yeah. That's going to also be like, so for example, you know, like, obviously, like our current educational system, like students come, learn, and then we test them without them having their books around. Like, it depends on the knowledge skills, like how much they were able to memorize. But, like, I'm also questioning, okay, is this the best educational system? Like, I mean, you can also, like, have all of these materials around because, like, in real life, we do have them. You can Google things. But, like, once you have those, can you make the same inferences that you did? Like, I mean, when is it important? Like, if you are, for example, thinking about an eyewitness testimony, like, people having the real account of the event is going to be important. But, like, that's going to be important if there is no cameras involved, right? Like, so, I mean, when do you really need your memory to be better? Like, and, like, do you always need it to be better? Because, like, one of the theoretical questions about memory is, like, do we have our memory so that, like, we can have, like, we can tell each other narratives about our past? So one of the ideas is that we are not really having this memory, like, evolve for, like, episodic incidents. It's for us to be able to flexibly think in, like, future simulation.
The other animals don't have this?
No.
Wow.
No.
Right.
Like, that's the one thing that the other animals don't have.
Wow.
So, like, that's one thing to think about. Like, why do we have memory? Like, is it to be able to, like, remember? I mean, obviously, from an evolutionary perspective, hey, that strawberry was poisonous, let's not eat that. Is important. But it's also important for us to be able to take instances of different events and put them together to, like, come up with, like, a tentative story. Like, what if this happens? What am I gonna do? So it's like future simulation, right? So one function, or, like, I don't know if it's a perk or if it's, like, the reason that memory evolved, but that's, like, one of the theories, like, actually says it's all about future simulation and our ability to be able to flexibly think and come up with, like, flexible solutions to future problems.
Yeah, I see. I have even further questions, but
well, let's like end it here so that our, like, audience doesn't die from our theoretical discussions.
But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Enjoyable to meet you.
For me too. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.